Hey, what's up everybody? Hammerheart Metal Reviews here once again, doing something a little bit different today, something I think is going to be a lot of fun. I'm going to be talking about what I consider to be the best 3-album runs in heavy metal history. So to clarify, these will be lists of bands that put out 3 albums in a row that are all absolutely top-notch, really solid, stellar albums. So, I mean, some of my favorite bands aren't even going to make this list because although they might have a handful of albums that I think are some of my favorite albums ever, if they didn't put out 3 in a row that I think are all really solid, then they probably won't be on this list. But also, that being said, I've limited this to like 25. When I started doing this list, like, it was going on forever. But I had to not have this be insanely long. So if you don't see a band mentioned on here that you think totally should be, it doesn't mean that I don't love those albums. I more than likely do, but depending. I mean, we'll get some comments going down below. But yeah, these are just my opinions. Didn't spend a ton of time on this, so I'm sure I'm overlooking some, just not thinking of them. But I won't do too much of a spiel here. Just gonna get right into this. Let's talk about some great 3-album runs in heavy metal history. So to kick this list off, I'm gonna go with Immortal. So this band has put out so much quality material, you could almost take any 3 albums. There's a couple that I think are a little weaker than others, but when I was looking at this, it was a really tough choice to narrow down which 3 might be the peak of their career. But for me, I'm going to go with Battles in the North, Blizzard Beasts, and At the Heart of Winter. I absolutely love all 3 of these albums. I know Blizzard Beasts maybe isn't as critically renowned as, say, At the Heart of Winter, but I still love it. I think Battles in the North is really awesome. At the Heart of the Winter is their absolute peak, in my opinion. So all in all, yeah, that 3-album run by Immortal, I think, is absolutely stellar, and that's why it's just cracking the list. Up next at number 24, I'm actually going with a more recent band, Mare Cognitum, and their most recent 3 albums, Phobos Monolith, Luminiferous Ether, and Solar Paroxysm. So these 3 past albums they've put out are all absolutely killer, just stellar stuff. Cosmic black metal masters, and these albums are just really top-notch stuff, top in the genre. So if you're into that kind of stuff at all and have not listened to Mare Cognitum, definitely go give those 3 albums a spin because, yeah, they're really firing on all cylinders right now. Solid, solid stuff. Up next at number 23, I'm going to go with some classics. Judas Priest. I'm going to their 70s material. The 3 albums I'm going to talk about are Sad Wings of Destiny, Sin After Sin, and Stained Class. To me, for Judas Priest, it doesn't get much better than that. I love their 70s era much more than their later stuff. Not to say I don't like other eras of the band. They've got a handful of really solid albums. But for a 3-album run with 3 absolutely stellar ones in a row, it's got to be these 3. Sad Wings of Destiny is my favorite Priest album. Sin After Sin isn't too far behind, and Stained Class is right there, right on par with it as well. I absolutely love all 3 of these Priest albums, and that's why they're in at 23. Up next at number 22, I'm going with some folk metal and Ensiferum with their first 3 albums, their self-titled debut, and then Iron, and then Victory Songs. So the first 2 albums featured Jari Maenpa still on lead vocals and guitar. He left the band after the first 2 albums to start Winter Sun, but then they brought in Petri Lindros from Northern, and they didn't miss a beat at all. Victory Songs, absolutely stellar debut for him. So this 3-album run, absolute masterpiece in epic folk metal, kind of blends power metal in with the folk metal and like melodic death metal, all thrown together, just really fun stuff, really awesome albums. That's why I've got it on this list. Up next at number 21, I'm going with one of my favorite death metal bands, Exhumed, and their first 3 albums, Gore Metal, Slaughter Cult, and Anatomy is Destiny. So, I mean, yeah, these guys started out more in like the gore metal, kind of death metal mixed with grind, much in the same vein as like older Carcass. And then by the time their 3rd album, Anatomy is Destiny, came out, they really mixed in a lot more melodies and a lot more technical playing. But I absolutely love these 3 albums. Gore Metal and Slaughter Cult are a couple of my favorite albums for sure. And Anatomy of Destiny is absolutely solid as well. Up next at number 20, I'm going with Moon Sorrow. This is another band where every album they have put out is absolutely stellar. So really you could pick any like series of 3 albums and I would be like, yeah, those are good choices. But for me, the 3-album run that I'm going to focus on is their 2nd, 3rd, and 4th albums, Voimasta Jakuniasta, Kivin Kantaja, and Varisakit. Probably mispronouncing all that, so I apologize. But yeah, these are some of my favorite Moon Sorrow albums. They're all right near the top of an absolutely stellar discography, and they had to be on this list. Up next at number 19, I'm going with Agalok and their first 3 albums, Pale Folklore, The Mantle, and Ashes Against the Grain. Their debut, Pale Folklore, is actually my favorite album by them, and The Mantle is an absolute masterpiece. Ashes Against the Grain, to me, might be like a slight step below those first 2, but it's still, for a 3-album run, it's absolutely stellar, and I had to include them on this list. Next at number 18, I'm going with some power metal and the Legends, Halloween, with their first 3 albums. Came out of the gates firing with Walls of Jericho, Kai Hansen's insanely high vocals, more in the speed metal vein. Then he didn't want to sing anymore. They brought in Michael Kiske, and they became the power metal legends that they are, with Keepers of the Seven Keys Part 1 and Keepers of the Seven Keys Part 2. Those 3 albums all released in a row, absolutely stellar. That's the stuff of legends for power metal right there, and that's why it's in here. Up next at number 17, I'm going to go with Carcass and their 2nd, 3rd, and 4th albums, Symphonies of Sickness, Necroticism, and Heartwork. So it's almost like 3 different eras of the band, even though these albums were released all in a row. Symphonies of Sickness was still very much in their grind era, but I absolutely love it. Necroticism was their peak, in my opinion, really combined the grind genre with some more melodic death metal, and then after that it became like fully melodic death metal with Heartwork. But these 3 albums in a row absolutely captures the span of their whole career perfectly, and it's just a great like sequence of albums to be released. Up next at 16, I'm going with Bursum and their 2nd, 3rd, and 4th albums, Det som en gang var, Vis Lisa Taras, and Philosophem. And yeah, what can you say about Bursum? I mean, you could have even put the first 3 on here and dropped off Philosophem, but for me, the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, I think, is the better sequence of 3 albums. A little more experimentation, bringing in some more ambient elements, but really just black metal classics. That I couldn't make this list without talking about Bursum. It's really their first 4 albums are absolutely awesome, but I'm only talking about 3 here, so I'm going with their 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. Up next at number 15, another more modern band, I'm going to go with Sayor and their first 3 albums, Roots, Aura, and Guardians. This is one of my favorite bands right now, for sure, and they just perfectly capture Scottish like feelings and atmospheres in their music, like black metal mixed with folk, and these first 3 albums are just absolutely stellar. I even really like the 4th album as well, but if I'm talking about just a 3-album run, these first 3 have got to be the ones that I go with, because they're just absolutely amazing. I could not talk about a 3-album run without mentioning Sayor, because they're really top-notch. Oh, excuse me. I always get the hiccups now, so I apologize for that too. But let's keep this going. Up next at number 14, going with more black metal and Taka and their first 3 albums. Nazistid Supporten Vid over Bjorgvin Grater Himmerek and Hordaland's Dogsfad. Absolutely 3 black metal classics. This is more like second wave black metal stuff, and it's just absolutely amazing. If you've never really gotten into Taka, please go listen to these first 3 albums, because they are legendary. The albums that follow these maybe aren't quite on par with these first 3, but that being said, these first 3, knock your socks off. Absolutely amazing riffs, great aggressive vocals, bringing in some folk melodies as well. Just really killer stuff. Up next at number 13, going with some death metal and Deicide. This is another tough one, because I could have done their first 3, but I'm going with their 2nd, 3rd, and 4th instead. So Legion, Once Upon the Cross, and Serpents of the Light. Arguably, you could go the self-titled debut, Legion, Once Upon the Cross. I wouldn't say much about that, but for me, I think Serpents of the Light edges out the debut slightly. They're both solid albums, but for a 3-album run, I think this really captured like the progression in their sound, and just 3 absolutely solid death metal albums. Up next at number 12, going with Satyricon. So some more black metal. Of course, talking about their first 3 albums. They kind of went off the rails a little bit after that. I do enjoy some of their later stuff, but it's not even close to on par with their first 3. Dark Medieval Times, The Shadow Throne, and Nemesis Divina. 3 absolute black metal classics. Really bring in some cold atmospheres, some folky elements as well. And it's just really killer stuff. So even if you've heard modern Satyricon and weren't into it, don't write them off. Definitely go check out these first 3 albums. This 3-album run is mint. Up next at number 11, sticking with black metal. This time going to Austria with Summoning, one of my favorite black metal bands ever. This is another tough one, because all their albums are pretty much kick-ass, but I'm going with their 2nd, 3rd, and 4th albums, Minas Morgul, Dol Guldur, and Stronghold. Just absolutely epic folk black metal classics. Like, there's no band like Summoning that has like accomplished this much over the course of their career. 3 albums in a row that are this fucking solid. Just hard to even talk about, because it's that good. Summoning is amazing. Now into my top 10, my 10 favorite 3-album runs in heavy metal history. So coming in at number 10, I am going with Morbid Angel and their first 3 albums, Altars of Madness, Blessed Are the Sick, and Covenant. 3 absolute staples of death metal. How could I not have this on the list? They're classics for a reason. Just killer death metal had to be in here. Up next at number 9, for me, I am going with Absu with their 2nd, 3rd, and 4th albums, The Son of Tifereth, The Third Storm of Sithral, and Terra. So yeah, I didn't put the debut in here because Terra is leaps and bounds their best album in my opinion. I could have even gone Third Storm of Sithral, Terra, and then Absu, the self-titled. But I really like The Son of Tifereth as well. I pretty much love everything Absu has ever done. But to me, for a 3-album run, it does not get much better than this. I could have even put this higher than 9. Like, Terra is one of my favorite albums ever by anyone. Third Storm of Sithral kicks so much ass. And Son of Tifereth, well, maybe not quite on the level of those 2 albums, is not far behind. It's absolutely solid. Thrash Black Metal Masters, that's why they're in at number 9. Up next at number 8, I'm going with Enslaved. This is another band where it's really tough because I enjoy their entire discography, pretty much everything they've ever released. You could name any like sequence of 3 albums from their career and I'd agree with you that it could be on this list. But for me personally, the 3-album sequence I'm going with is their early stuff. Vikinglingar, Veldy, Frost, and Eld. That is their peak in my opinion. Like I said, I love all the eras of this band. I'm not shitting on any of their other stuff. Any sequence of 3 albums could be on here because they are that good of a band. But for me, their early stuff absolutely slays. Viking Blackmail classics. That's why it's in at number 8. Up next at number 7, I'm going with Opeth. Another band where almost any sequence of albums, at least to a certain point, it would have made sense. But for me, I'm going to go with Morning Rise, My Arms Your Hearse, and Still Life. Arguably, you could have done My Arms Your Hearse, Still Life, Blackwater Park, or Still Life, Blackwater Park, Deliverance. Those are all great 3-album runs. But for me personally, Morning Rise is my favorite Opeth album. So I think Morning Rise, My Arms Your Hearse, and Still Life is really the best 3-album sequence in their career, so that's the one I am going with. Up next at number 6, I'm going with King Diamond. Of course he's going to be in here, because how could he not? The legend of concept albums, and wow, has so many good stuff, but I'm going to go with his first 3, Fatal Portrait, Abigail, and Them. Abigail and Them are 2 of my favorite metal albums ever. Fatal Portrait maybe isn't quite on the level of those, but it's a solid album, and yeah, this had to be here. It's King Diamond. Of course it's going to be here. Now to the top 5. My top 5 favorite 3-album runs in metal history. So coming in at number 5, I'm going with Bathory, with Under the Sign of the Black Mark, Bloodfire Death, and Hammerheart. This is another band where it's very tough because I could have put The Return in here and left out Hammerheart. But I feel like this 3-album span is perfect because it encapsulates like 2 completely different genres that Korthon started. With Under the Sign of the Black Mark, that was really the peak of early black metal, in my opinion, the album that really inspired a lot of the second wave Norwegian bands. Then he went on to do Bloodfire Death, started to bring in some Viking metal themes, but while still mostly rooted in black metal. And then Hammerheart went completely different direction, almost like pure Viking metal, not really much black metal left to be had there. But those 3 albums in a row, oh, it's hard to beat that. There's just such epic classic albums. This had to be high on my list. I almost wanted to put this higher than 5, but the next 4 are just as killer, if not more. So, coming in at number 4, going with my favorite death metal band of all time, Death. It's another one where any sequence of 3 albums would make sense, but for me, I'm going with Leprosy, Spiritual Healing, and Human. Leprosy is the best old school death metal album in my opinion. I just absolutely love everything about it. Spiritual Healing is maybe a more underrated one. I don't think it gets as much love as it should. I absolutely love everything about that. Human is where it started getting a little more progressive and experimental, but I absolutely love that as well. Could have easily thrown in a different sequence to include individual thought patterns and symbolic, but for me, this is the 3 that I'm going with. Up next at number 3, of course, I'm going to talk about Iron Maiden, one of my favorite bands of all time. This was a tough one as well. Lots of different sequences of albums that could have made sense here. But to me, their best 3-album run is Power Slave, Somewhere in Time, and Seventh Son of a Seventh Son. Those are just close to perfect albums for the genre. Absolutely love them to bits. That's why it's in at number 3. So that just leaves 2. If you've watched this channel before, you might be able to guess which 2 bands I'm going to talk about. But if not, maybe it'll be a surprise. So here we go. In at number 2, I am going with Windeer, one of my favorite black metal bands of all time. Perfectly combining folk with black metal, and just the melodies and atmospheres they can capture is perfect. I'm going to go with their second, third, and fourth albums, Arntor, 1184, and Lickford. Could have included the debut here, but I think Lickford is a little better than Soknaralder. I can't say that, but honestly, 1184, the one I have a poster of right there, is one of my favorite albums of all time. It's like a 10 out of 10. Lickford is not too far behind, and Arntor is even better than Lickford. Arntor is almost as good as 1184. Like, these are 3 albums that are almost 10 out of 10s, all 3 of them. So that's why I have to be this high. They just, like, there's not too much for me personally that is better than this 3-album run. But there's one band that I am going to talk about now, which probably won't be a surprise. Going back to power metal, and one of my favorite bands of all time, easily my favorite power metal band, Blind Guardian. Another one where there'd be different like sequences of albums that would make sense, but I'm gonna go with Somewhere Far Beyond, Imaginations from the Other Side, and Nightfall and Middle Earth. How does it get better than that? Like, that's why it's in at number 1. Imaginations from the Other Side is possibly my favorite Blind Guardian album, but all 3 of these are like my top 3 Blind Guardian albums, probably. So to have my 3 favorite albums by a band released all in a row, of course that's going to be here, and the quality of these albums is pretty unmatched, especially for power metal. This list is to capture all genres, but yeah, I had to go with Blind Guardian here. This is just, to me, the best 3-album run in heavy metal history. So anyways, these are just my opinions as usual. I know I missed a shit ton. There's big name bands that I didn't mention. I could have thrown so many things in here. So like I said, it doesn't mean that I don't like them. I'm sure I do. But I'd love to hear what your favorites are down below. Let me know what you thought of my list, or if you'd switch different albums from some of these bands. Just have some fun with this. These are not facts. These are just my opinions, and just wanted to have some fun discussions. If you got a YouTube channel, I'd love to see a response video about this. Go do something similar, or just give me some comments down below on what your favorites are. Anyways, rambling on way too goddamn long here again. But until next time, give me a like and give me a subscribe. Hammer Heart Metal Reviews out.